Yeah, with the way that it was actually depicted for how this was gonna actually work, like it was just crazy because Clark, he sacrificed himself to everybody. Uh, Handcuffed with Lois, and Lois is like, what does the S stand for? He's like, well, in my home planet it stands for hope. He was like, no, this is definitely something else. It looks like an S. It was just so funny banner. Like the critics had said that he was kind of like one-sided. He was really serious and stern. But that scene right there, it was a comical scene. They played off each other, but it wasn't like they were just being silly for no good reason. It was just like a funny moment, you know. And there's a lot of different emotion that Clark goes through the entire movie. I mean, a lot of it is very dark, very gritty, because with having those kind of superpowers, that's a burden, you know. Like you go through a lot to keep and maintain yourself, but by the end of the movie, before I even go through the rest of this review, you see what resembles to be really Superman. And it's kind of like almost with the Batman Begins. By the end of the movie, you see why he is the Dark Knight, why he is Batman. And with this one, of course, everything goes full circle, which I'll get into the rest of it. But one of the best things that I saw was after he sacrificed himself, and he finally, General Zod shows up with his scene, and actually Fiora, she plays a big role in this one. The actor, I'm not sure what her name is, but she did a really good job in this role, because what ends up happening is she picks up Clark, and she was like, well, I want to speak to your superior officer, talking to the military that was actually holding Clark, and she said, I want to pick up that young lady over there. And basically they're going to pick up Lois and bring her on the ship too. This brings so much more levels of like worry and danger, because once the scene actually goes up, and actually Clark, he passes over the crystal to Lois, they finally do meet up with General Zod. All of a sudden something's wrong with Clark, and I thought when I was seeing it, I was thinking, okay, man, how in the world they have kryptonite, like, and they're not being affected? No, it was like the environment. There was actually the atmospheric environment of the ship was what was used to be with Krypton, and Clark had been so used to being on Earth and actually having the strength on Earth that his body was like it was not tolerant of it, and it couldn't maintain itself. And so he started coughing up blood, he started to fall down, he started going into a seizure, and Lois is just begging, help him, help him, help him. So I was like, nothing I can do for him. Like, he's just gonna have to run his course. And it was very crazy because it showed a lot of emotion, that scene, but then it's like a flash or something, and you see Clark back on the farm, and you're like, what in the world's going on? And all of a sudden, like, it's Clark and Zod is actually speaking to Clark through kind of like this dream concept. So I'm not sure if this is some kind of technology or this is kind of a Kryptonian thing. I'm not really sure. They didn't go into the details behind it, but it was a very interesting scene where Zod unfolds of what happened to his home planet, what from his perspective really needs to take place, and what will be at stake if they brought Krypton back. And so, of course, Earth was the ideal place to do that, but with the machines and with the need to take place, they'd have to wipe all of human civilization to actually do it. And it would change the atmosphere of Earth so much that nobody would even be alive to have it existing. And Clark was sitting there debating at first, like, okay, we can bring our people back, but he didn't know that those ramifications would be the extent. And so because of that, what ends up happening is Clark was like, no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden you just see these mounds of just human skulls, and he just falls into it. And I swear this is a comic book scene, but I can't remember what comic book specifically, but it was so felt like a comic book scene, you know? Like, to actually see all the depiction of all the skulls and him just falling into it and just like saying no. It's almost like he was being tempted, you know? I'm not sure if they tried to explore, well, I'm not going to get into that. I'll leave that for another day. But transfer back, and Clark realized he was dreaming, and they were actually taking his blood sample, and he couldn't move because his strength is completely gone. And so they're still on the ship, and Lois is captured and held captive as well. And so they were about to go and do whatever without Clark's consent anyway. And so at that point, she realized the crystal. She saw an opening, she put the crystal in. Jor-El shows up again, and he's actually taking over the ship that Zod was actually on. And from there, he's able to get Lois and drive her out. And Lois actually was kicking some butt. She was actually using the gun that Jor-El told her to use, and she was actually firing and stuff like that. She was bold. There was an arty scene that she was in where she was actually just being just a normal journalist and actually trying to figure out everything. And then there was some scenes that she was just bold. Like, she would go and do what she had to do. This is a really good Lois. I think it's probably one of the better Loises I've actually seen shown on the actual silver screen or the large screen. And so that's saying a lot. But anyway, going back into the rest of the story, so Lois is able to get off the ship, but her pod is damaged in the midst of it. But because Jor-El is in the system, he was able to bring the elements of the ship to exhibit kind of how like the human properties of Earth are. And so because of that, Clark is able to get his strength back. And I notice how I keep on saying Clark, but they call him Kal-El. They've yet to even call him Superman at this point. It's just either Kal-El or Clark, Kal-El or Clark. And it's really good because not until really the end they really start calling him Superman. But that's a whole different story. So with that, they get to a point where, okay, now Clark has powers, and Jor-El tells him, look, you have the opportunity to save everyone. You have the opportunity to save Lois right now. And he told him to hit the wall, and he just goes and he veers back and he just goes and flies, because they're really high up right now in space. And so Clark flies to try to save Lois's pod, and like he pushes himself. He gets to her in time. Of course, he saves her. But this is where everything goes just crazy. And I'm not going to describe every single fight scene. I'm going to maybe touch on 2 fight scenes, because after this point, once they get back and Clark gets back to Earth, this is where everything just continues progressively with all the action. Like, it goes from fight scene to fight scene to fight scene to fight scene to destruction to destruction to destruction to loss of life. Like, you wouldn't even believe. Like, so I think one of the best fight scenes that I saw was with Fiora and one of the bigger gentlemen. It reminded me of like the Superman movie 2 with the bigger guy. I forgot his name, but they double team him. Like, they are just going at him. Fiora's like, look, you're weak. Like, we are evolution, we're progress, because you have regard for human life. We have total disregard for anyone or anything that you love. For every life that you save, we're gonna kill 1 million more. And like they do. Like, there's times where Fiora's just like jumping onto a military convoy, just killing people. She's using her speed and her strength. As you see, like, it reminded me of like a Dragon Ball Z, like an anime moment. Like, they were just going at it. But Clark was doing everything he could to protect those that he loved, those that didn't love him, that were trying to kill him. Like, the military was trying to kill him the whole entire time up until a mid-climactic point. But the fight scene between Fiora, Clark, and the bigger gentleman, like, it was epic. And most of it took place in Smallville. Half of Smallville was gone. I was like, dang, Smallville, like, it's just been destroyed right now. And it's just so crazy, because going back to the flashback scenes, there was times where Clark would go and save people, and they were telling him, like, dude, this is like epic. Like, this guy, this son of yours is progress for our nation. Like, he's a godsend, so to speak, or something like that. And it was even a scene where Clark was actually at a church, and this is when he was debating turning himself in, and the preacher there was telling him, look, you can take a leap of faith. Sometimes that's what's needed for you to progress and to do what you're called to do. Even though the preacher knew he was an alien, like, he had the faith enough in him to go and do what he had to do, because it was just interesting. It was so interesting, because all of Smallville, some of them kept his secret because they knew what was at stake, and they knew that how the world reacted had to be a specific kind of way. And so in turn, like, when he started saving most of Smallville and fighting off, it was like a build-up of all the frustration and pain was for a certain purpose. And it's just crazy. And so that fight ensues. One of the other big fights, which I'll get into later, because there's so much in between that point to that point to that point, I'm not going to go into it in this review. That's not my responsibility to spoil you the entire movie. But the major fight scene with Zod and Clark, which starts off, I believe it even really starts off in Metropolis, and it just progresses so much because most of everything that Zod was working for, it gets destroyed. The thing that he was working for most, the thing he cared about most, it was ripped away from him, and he blames Clark for it, of course. And so it's just so epic. But with what happens next, Clark goes to this point where he's telling him, look, like, I have to protect these people, and you have no disregard for these people. And Zod said, well, I care for my nation, and you destroy them. I have nothing to live for. You rip my soul out. I'm going to kill every single last one of them. And so the fight just goes, and like every punch, every throw, every scene, like you see the force behind it. It's like an impact. It's like an implosion of everything around them. It's just so epic. The fight goes from there, goes to up into space, to go back down. It goes everywhere, and it gets to this very interesting point where, like, Zod even's like, I don't need this armor I have on me. He's like, I'm a warrior. I'm used to focusing and honing in on my environment. You cannot beat me. And he tears it off, and he starts to fly. And he's actually able to control flight. And that is when it's just like, I've never seen a fighting aerial like this before. I've never seen anything like it. Like, they showed it kind of in, like, The Matrix Reloaded, Revolutions, but not to this level. It's just so epic. So, gets to the final scene of their fight, and Clark has him, and Zod is sitting there fighting him, but Clark has him by the neck, and he's like, you know what, I'm not going to keep stopping, and before I go, I'm going to kill this family that you love so dearly. And he's using his laser vision, he's just honing in, and it's just slowly panning, almost about to kill this family. And Clark's like, please don't do this, please don't do this, stop, stop. He's just begging him with just holding him like this. And as I was like, I'm never going to stop. There's nothing you can ever do or say to get me to stop. And Clark is faced with the decision what to do. And he makes the most human and relatable decision. But it's like, when you think about Superman doing this, it's just a blur. Like, Clark literally has to go and snaps his neck. And you don't expect it. You're like, it's an awe moment. But at the same time, it was like, what was he really going to do? Was he going to let these people die? Or was he going to, you know, there was really nothing for him to do. He couldn't physically stop and hold him to do anything other than what he had him at. And it was like, either he could have sit there and let him kill all those people or not. And it was like a sacrifice that Clark had to make. And after he did it, it just broke him. Like, he went down on his knees. He just screamed and hollered. And luckily Lois was there to hold him and keep up the pieces. But it was such a crazy scene. And it reminded me back to when, like, not Jor-El, but, well, yeah. Actually, all of them made sacrifices to do what this man was called to do. And it was like, finally, ultimately, Clark did. Because Jonathan sacrificed himself to keep Clark's secret. Jor-El did everything he could and sacrificed his life to make sure Clark ended up where he wanted to be. And then Clark, to protect the people he loved, to do the thing that he was meant and called to do, like, he had to get rid of the very last Kryptonian, essentially, that he would ever really know. And I'm not going to tell you how that plays into. I'm not saying that every other Kryptonian that was on that ship died, but that was the last one at that moment. And it was crazy to see a sacrifice that he made. And so it transfers back to the Kent farm. He's with his mom. His mom was like, telling him how proud she was of him. She was like, what are you going to do from here on your downtime? He's like, well, you know, I think I'm about getting me a small-time job and work and do some things. And in the final scene, you're just looking, you're like, okay, this is epic, because he's going to the daily planet. And I'm not going to explain to me, like, how my thought is, like, okay, if all these people see this man doing all these great things, I think at one point even somebody referred to him as Clark. Like, how is that going to work, you know? But it wasn't, when I went back and I saw it the second time, there wasn't that many people really heard who he was supposed to be. They didn't really call him by anything. Lois was maybe the only person that knew. The military, no, I think they're not stupid, because there was a scene where Clark went with the military convoy. He was like, look, I'm going to help and I'm gonna do what I can to save on my terms. Please respect that. He just flies off, destroying like orbital like sentry that was kind of like monitoring him, and it was just so funny. But to me, the movie, like at the end of it, I just really enjoyed it. It felt like a kind of a Batman Begins kind of mode. Like it set up so perfectly what's coming next. There was a shot of a LexCorp truck. There was the military satellite. The satellite that was in when Zod and Clark were fighting, that said Wayne Industries on it. There was a reference to Star Labs. It was talking about Cyborg. There were so many different elements there that sets up for the next level of either Justice League or another Superman movie, or even the progression of a Batman-Superman collaboration. It's gonna be epic, y'all. I really love this movie. It was definitely the best movie of the summer. Was it a perfect movie? Was it like everything you expected more? Was it like A+ material? You know, I can't say that. I just know, being a Superman fan, being an action fan, being a person that loves a great story and a development of it, I'd have to get the nothing less than a B+ or A-, just because of how well they did it, how much they fit in a 2 hour and 30 long progress. Like, it wasn't 3 hours long, you know. But I was entertained from the start to the finish. My jaws dropped. Every person now that looks and talks about the movie, and I've talked to, said they loved the movie. I haven't heard one person that said they didn't like the movie, in all honesty. Like, so don't listen to the critics. Don't listen to what I have to say. Go and see it for yourself. If you like it, I'm glad you like it. If you didn't like it, put comments on the below. Tell me what you didn't like about it so we can discuss it. I'm going to make a third video about everything, my thought about this. But I really loved this movie, y'all. And I hope y'all do too. This is SCL0320 signing out. I give this movie, like I said, a 9 out of 10. Peace.